what we're going to do today is talk about the content that we're launching today, which is through something we're calling the Mobile Playbook, which is the best practices or the how-to guide for how to think about mobile in 2012. We've organized this around 5 questions that were very consistent that we got from our customers over the last year, which are loosely, how does mobile change your value proposition? How does it change your relationship with that consumer? How does it affect your digital destination? How does it affect your website or your application? How's your organization adapting to mobile? And we'll dive into this in a couple of minutes. How can you connect with a tablet audience? And how are tablets distinct from a smartphone experience? And let's dive into it. I don't want to waste more time sort of setting it up. So first, maybe for you, Michelle, can you talk a little, we can't repeat it enough, that mobile changes this value proposition. It changes how you think about a Starwood customer. So if you don't mind talking to kick us off a little about how you've approached that question of the digitally connected consumer.
Sure. So we know that smartphone ownership among specifically leisure travelers is over 50%, and it's almost 75% for business travelers, and this number is only growing. We initially started to cater to the mobile consumer with search, knowing that this is the most common category for travel, and then high-impact brand awareness units that were just really robust and took over the full screen. These rich media executions really cater to the way that users use smartphones with things like swipe and tilt and shake functionality. And with that, we revealed brand messaging, offers, we launched videos, and we even had social sharing functionality. From there, we really adapted our search strategy to mobile with the launch of click-to-call and location extensions. These 2 components were critical in addressing the needs of our mobile users, with having, of course, a clickable phone number that someone could then immediately book, and then an expanded map where someone could see directions to our hotels. And finally, our emerging platforms team has built, of course, mobile sites and recently launched our new SPG mobile application for iPhone, which really provides that content that's most relevant to consumers, regardless of where they are in their travel stays, pre-stay, in-stay, post-stay, etc.
So what I think is amazingly forward-thinking about what you've done is you've embraced the on-the-go user who wants to make a phone call and connect with a property. But you've also sort of thought upper funnel. You've thought a lot about how the consumer discovers and gets involved in this. Do other folks want to get in on the conversation about how the now connected everywhere consumer changes the way that you need to think about it, how it actually changes fundamentally the value proposition for your organization?
Yeah, I mean, so from where we sit, I mean, there's a few different places. So we sit in a world where we sort of straddle between new and existing customers, and so we've had to think through how do you work with an existing customer that may have questions about service or what's on TV tonight, or just may want to just know sort of functionally what they can do with their services, and then we also have to look at how does it impact new sales. So when we have sales going on, we have customers doing research because they're on the train and they're not ready to convert, but they at least want to know what they want to look at. It really does add this extra lens that we're now starting to pay a lot more of attention to, and it's been this way for about a year now, just to sort of go back a little bit. But it's definitely something that's changed sort of the facet of sort of all the digital campaigns that we structure, because mobile becomes a bigger part of it, and in many cases sort of it's no longer the last minute, hey, what are we doing with mobile? It's sort of like, here's how all the experiences will lay out, and mobile is always a part of those experiences.
I think you're right to call out that mobile is sort of this fundamentally different context. And you mentioned the train, but it could be a lot of different places where people are doing different forms of research or making new decisions that weren't aided by the availability of sort of the web previously. Juan, maybe moving to you and sort of the range of customers that you see, can you talk a little just about the kinds of questions you're getting from customers as they approach mobile and think about the user and the best ways to engage that user?
Sure. Well, I mean, it really depends. We work with so many various brands across retail, across entertainment, electronics that mobile has to plug into their objectives in a certain fashion. And there really is, a year over year, you can notice there's a noticeable change in brands trying to identify the behavior in mobile for their consumers and determining what is the right fit. And what we try to do is to drive the difference between something that is really geared towards sustainability to make brands discoverable as the behavior of their consumers change so dramatically in mobile, and then what are the fits where it can be more relevant to, whether it's retail or something of that extent. It's really making sure that when they're asking the questions that we identify the fundamentals without just getting hung up on some of the innovation and some of the bright shiny objects, to make sure that brands are really getting the fundamentals down properly, whether it's aligning with the proper content, whether it's having a destination in place, understanding what is scalable right now in mobile. But the questions that really come a lot from the clients are, what are consumers doing in mobile, and trying to identify that behavior and how to align the brands with that behavior.
Yep. And again, adding a little Google data to that is that the behavior we see is a highly local experience where people are out and about on smartphones, as well as being entertained when they've got that time on the train or doing that little bit of research. Mm-hmm. And we see a whole bunch of things on tablets that we'll talk about a little bit later with a fundamentally different user behavior. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about those fundamentals. Amit, one of the things that we're pointing people to, which is a lot of people consider the basics, but is building the right mobile property from which to engage. 1-800-Flowers was very early and is actually, I think, on the third iteration, and I think has been as good as anyone, and we've recognized that, at really thinking about the needs of the on-the-go user. Can you talk a little about how you've approached the mobile website?
Sure. Thanks for the kind words also, Jason. I think fundamentally it's the things that we are talking about really take a center stage, and I think even deeper than that, we were mature 6 years back in mobile, but every iteration has shown us really something very fundamental, is that we have to approach this space from a user-centric point of view. So let me give you 3 tangible examples of how we built our mobile experience and keep on building a new one informed by this user experience. So first of all, a challenge that most organizations face is what to bring to mobile. So our position always has been bring the right things to mobile. You should not be bringing everything from desktop to mobile. You really need to study user data to understand what to bring to mobile. Second, and I think, as with the release of the mobile playbook today, there's an incredible ecosystem of resources that any of these brands or people who are, desirous of moving into this space can tap into. So it's, the GoMo site that you guys have, and then, bunch of association or even their brand peers, call them, ask them what they are doing, and you'll get an incredible, baseline resources to go out and build your mobile site. I think third, which I find to be really interesting, is be open and, iterate, right? Last year we had what we thought was an award-winning experience, but we upped it again by, re-scripting that experience. So I would say have fun and be open, but make sure you start today.
And I think that putting together a couple of things, Juan talked about user experiences, right? And you heard about Michelle talk about how to really think about connecting that user with a property while they're on the go. And you're saying look at the data for what people will and will not do from a mobile device. I think it's different for every company. But being able to see that user experience, see where they engage, is something we hear repeatedly from people who have been into this and have really invested. So moving on a little bit, let's move sort of more into the organizational questions. It's clear that success starts at sort of how you think about this organizationally. And Josh, maybe I'd start with you. Can you talk about how Comcast has thought about integrating mobile with the broader range of things that you think about?
Yeah, so one caveat I want to throw out there. So my specific charge is around sales predominantly on the .com channel. I have a colleague that I work with on the self-service piece, but there's clearly a whole group of folks here that are focused on app development and helping you really take what is a great experience with our products to that next level in terms of mobile. So I think what I could probably best speak to for purposes of I think what a lot of marketers struggle with is that I think that first part of sales aspects of it. So I think what the Starwood work is great, and I used it, by the way, the other day. I literally booked the room in like 10 minutes because I decided to stay in Philly. But an old colleague that I used to work with at Razorfish, this guy Jeremy Lockhorn, he said, he just had a study where he said, mobile is both a distraction and an enhancement, or multitasking. And this is clearly one of those audiences where we saw that. And so what I go back to is that old saying, you build it, they will come. It turns out that we actually built nothing, and a tremendous amount of people showed up anyway. And so what we saw, really to the point of data, was that a lot of people were coming on mobile devices and trying to actually buy service, and we didn't have an experience for them, and they still tried to do it. So it sort of shot down the idea that this person only wants to call us or only wants to go onto a desktop and complete this order. So we took that data sort of as the starting point, and we coupled it with Google data that said, hey, here's a bunch of searches for actually our phrases and really important words for us that also exist just in mobile. And so the question becomes, what are we going to do with this? Because it became a real easy conversation because it was about here's money being left on the table in terms of opportunity to really meet a consumer demand. It wasn't about, do we need a social app to maybe help engage users? I mean, this was clearly a point of saying there's traffic there. We need to make sure we're answering demand for what customers want to do. And so fundamentally, we're able to do that within our organization and sort of set up those processes to make that happen.
So I hadn't heard that story before, and I actually really, really like that story. But I want to push you on one thing. Organizationally, where did that happen? So when you had that aha moment that these people are coming to Comcast sites and want to engage, was that in a marketing organization? Was there a mobile-specific organization? Who was seeing that data, and how did it disseminate throughout Comcast? Yeah,
so it was probably in a couple places. I'll say it was part of the larger marketing organization. So our team, we've done mobile display from before I got here. So I've been here for a year, and so we did mobile display before I got here. We didn't do a lot, if anything, really on mobile search. We might have dabbled in it slightly with some specific pages, but really nothing until June of last year. And so we're coming up on our anniversary, and it's a tremendous amount of volume for us. But the initial look at the data came within this group here because we were the ones looking at where what we call connects happen on the .com channel. And we saw all this traffic coming in from places that just was a place we didn't have an experience for. So it started there, and then it basically went throughout our internal organization, being the .com team, of what does an experience look like, what do offers look like, how do we operationalize these things, and then it goes up into the larger organization of full, Comcast marketers that say, hey, we go after the back-to-school market when it comes to people going back to college. And this is clearly an audience that loves to convert on their mobile devices. So how do we marry the existing back-to-school experiences that have existed at Comcast for years? How do we leverage mobile into this? So it started to become sort of ever-reaching after that.
Great. Thank you. Can I ask other people? I think this organizational one is one that we hear a lot, so I want to go a little deeper on this. Michelle or others, can you talk a little about sort of the specialization versus sort of broad-based approach to mobile and how Starwood thinks about it?
Sure. So within our digital organization, there is a marketing arm, which I sit in, and then there's an emerging platforms team. The emerging platforms team has been built out to really own the infrastructure and the plumbing of our sites, of our app, and so forth. And then on the marketing side, my role is to really help drive brand initiatives and objectives to those, either be it for the app or for the sites, for each individual brand. So it's interesting, where I sit, I'm not a mobile-specific person. I'm display, mobile, I wear all those hats, and that's how Starwood is structured.
Mm-hmm.
We look at really mobile is just part of the integrated strategy. We don't look at it in a silo, and so that's kind of how the digital team works. But without our emerging platforms team, we don't have any of that foundational plumbing. I love saying plumbing, but the foundation for us to really drive our mobile initiatives.
I think even though you're not only mobile specific, you are an emerging platforms team that is ahead of different things and adopting things early and then helping other people take advantage of it. Amit, can you talk a little about how you guys have thought about this organizationally?
Sure. So I think just reflecting our sense of maturity, and I would also say a sense of deep urgency within the organization on mobile, what we have actually done is made mobile everyone's responsibility. And I don't say that lightly. So everyone, including our president, to the frontline customer service staff, gets asked the question every day almost in any of their meetings, what are we doing for mobile today and now? So it is really, for us, a very transformative force. I would say there are two other things that we need to sort of be very cognizant of. One is that we have made mobile a part of both our quantitative and qualitative KPIs, so that it's not just a periodic focus for us, but if we are looking at conversion on a daily basis, we are looking at mobile conversion on a daily basis too. So people are getting, in sort of, that it's an important part of their focus. Now it's going to become a structural part of their focus per se. And I would say finally and most critically, we have mobile as its own P&L and it has its own budget. So that allows us to do a couple of things. One is have a laser focus on the ROI metrics associated with the channel, but I think even more importantly, it allows us to move very nimbly. So for example, Michelle was talking about click-to-call ads. I did not have to wait for the desktop team to come back with a budget. I was able to move the day it was announced. So those things add up to very specific organizational advantages, but I think also marketplaces advantages for any brand out there.
And we go into some depth in this. Thank you all for getting in on that. We go into some depth on this in the mobile playbook, but I think there is no one recommendation that we have for an organization. It does depend on the size of the organization. It does depend on sort of how many products, how many branches, and where the organization is in its sort of adoption of mobile. But I do think that I can represent that there are folks, and Google is like what you heard Amit talk about at 1-800-Flowers, which is that we're trying to make everyone in the organization responsible for mobile. But we have found that when you are kickstarting an effort, it is very helpful to have people whose job is solely mobile, who's the person who brings mobile to the meetings, who brings the data to the meetings, and who is explicitly responsible for it. And ultimately, it is someone's P&L responsibility here, like at 1-800-Flowers. So I think you saw the continuum represented there. And this is a conversation I'm sure people will be having for years. Moving on, Juan, can you talk about from an agency perspective how an agency thinks about going deep with customers on mobile?
Yeah, I mean, OMD's been doing mobile for quite some time. We started Airwave about almost 2 years ago, and the purpose was to take clients deeper down that path into mobile and to really serve as these mobile practitioners that bring the experience to the space, the understanding that in certain cases it complements other mediums, but in other cases it is a standalone initiative. But even in the fashion of getting clients to understand where it complements other mediums, whether it be traditional, whether it be online, is that there are some things in mobile, even if it's display, that are slightly different. And they need to be handled by a group of people that it's really their own sole responsibility. So whether it's things like back-end metrics or allowing creative to be developed properly, that it really taps into the device functionality and creates this unique experience for consumers, it's really delivering that expertise and delivering that knowledge and helping those clients kind of create that roadmap. And understanding that in some cases it's hard to put a roadmap in mobile that, let's say, goes beyond 12 months because technology changes so rapidly, but just to help them down that path throughout that time and always bring innovation to them. So trying to get them deep from a sustainability point of view so that it's always on, as we mentioned earlier, but then also understanding what's the right thing to do in mobile, and when to apply it, and how to manage it properly.
I think it's worth saying that mobile still is a specialization. It still is a skill that the average marketer, the average digital person has to learn, right? And some of that is about sort of some of the technologies that haven't been invented yet, and some of it's about sort of order of operations of what things to do first and what you can track and what you can't and what targeting is available. And frankly, the user experience, because in digital, so much of what we're trying to do is finishing that transaction or that experience on the actual device in that moment, whereas so much of mobile is about taking that digital experience and then ultimately continuing it, as we heard earlier with phone calls, in a physical world where someone walks into a store. And so there's a very specialized understanding of how users, where we started this conversation, are using their mobile devices. And that's where I think the marketer and the business person has to take the time to understand what's going on in mobile. Then what people are working to do is figure out how to scale that organizationally. Maybe using that as a transition. Josh, did you want to get in on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, so fundamentally I agree. To an extent, I think. So I could tell you frankly. So there's folks on the team who've been here that are new that have obviously digital backgrounds, but I can tell you there's not a mobile expert on the team. And I say that with a tremendous amount of confidence that we're still doing the right things. So we've got agency partners and we've got people who are helping us understand the space more. But I think one of the mistakes that every new technology makes when it gets into this space of digital is it's new, and so there's a tremendous amount of companies that get built around it, and spin-offs that happen around it, and specialists and titles. That it becomes bigger in terms of the process that's involved with it. So sort of hitting on all the points between budgeting and staffing and the ideas. I mean, at its core, we want to keep customers connected. Well, new and old customers connected how they want. So I think a lot of what we try and do is figure out, what marketing programs do we have that are working now? How do they apply to digital? And so I agree, there's clearly a difference in what you do. There's things you would do in mobile that you wouldn't do on desktop and vice versa. But I think we've tried very hard to say, you know what, this isn't some code that we need to crack in terms of figuring out what makes that specific mobile user tick. And this may be specific to our business. So I think for the folks at Starwood or 800 Flowers, there's a little bit of an immediacy that can happen, and you do need to think about them a little bit differently. But I think for us, we've stayed very well grounded in that this is another extension of what we do. So when we do a digital campaign, there's display, there's search, there's email, there's on-site experience, there's mobile. We try our best to not figure out what do we need to do differently for the mobile crowd.
Well, I think that's a great counterpoint. I think that so much of this is about your business, right? And obviously Google's here to help with data and case studies and best practices. But so much of it for the people tuning in is about something you know better than we do, right? Which is your business and where your consumer wants to engage you. And so some of it's about harnessing the technology and the connectivity to suit the goals of the business in the way that Josh says.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be clear also, the experience is definitely different. We don't have a website. That's what we used to do. So it's definitely, I do want to clarify that part, but I think the idea is that we don't want to reinvent something just for someone in mobile.
Our view is that there's a lot of experience that will translate well from the digital world into the sort of mobile world, the mobile digital world. But there are new experiences and new use cases and new contexts that are happening in mobile, and that's where we're helping people understand how to engage that consumer. I think we're saying some of the same things, that you have to build for both. Before I move on, anyone else sort of having reacted to your fellow hanger-outers?
Sure. I think what we have realized is sort of in between what you and Josh are sort of surfacing is that there is a fundamental DNA of any company or any brand and their marketing activities that should be bought over and should be used for the mobile playbook too. But then there is going to be enough nuanced either sort of platform nuances or things that you can do on mobile that you can't ordinarily on desktop or other channels that should be looked into too. So I think it's a question of where do you want to start from. If you want to start from just leveraging the in-house best practices, that's a great place to start. If you want to start with something very specific, that's also a great place to start. But you have to keep on iterating based on what users are telling you.
It's that learning culture and looking at the data, and I think that's a key point. I might use that as a jumping off point for moving to the next question, which is about marketing. And we've hit on this. I heard some people talk about search and display and some other things. But fundamentally, we market for an ultimate result. We want to move a user toward sort of a destination. And so a lot of this is about ROI. And I know that each of you, in different ways, is thinking about ROI. We're not doing this to do mobile anymore. We're doing it because it's an at-scale medium that is or is not working for us. And so, again, Michelle, maybe starting with you, you've had a lot of success and are very specific about your ROI requirements of the medium. Can you talk a little about sort of both what you did and what did and didn't work for you?
Sure. So, this is a perfect segue to our pre-segue from our earlier discussion, but what we saw right away was our mobile customers are inherently different. We have to treat them differently. 9 in 10 of our mobile travelers are taking an action within 24 hours, and 4 in 10 are taking an action immediately. And by action, I mean a reservation or a booking. So, and this is different than what we see on desktop. So, where we've seen success from an ROI perspective is really providing those solutions that provide a very seamless user experience, a very fast one, that really intersect our guests at the right place with the right message at the right time. We've done tactics like layering on third-party data so we can get our head around travel intent. We've done things like I mentioned earlier, the paid search with the location extension, so the map is present. We're trying things out like geofencing and hotspotting to again mirror where we think our best customers are, or people who are most likely to be our customers or most likely to book are. So that's really been successful for us as like a tactic. And then from tools, again, it's that mobile click-to-call and the SPG app I mentioned earlier, having mobile-enabled promotional pages, anything that just makes, the way I try to think about it is mobile first. It has to be a much easier, simpler experience for someone to engage, especially when we're talking about a hotel room. It is a big transaction, so that's where we've seen success. And you know, ROI is tough with mobile. We can't track the way we can on desktop, and that's our biggest pain point. So when we think about KPIs in our discussion earlier, I mean, that's something we're always challenged with at Starwood. We simply can't measure back our marketing spend the way we can, the way we do on with our display campaign. So we have clicks to call to really help us with that, and that's been a huge win for us. But in absence of that, we're still missing, I think, a true attribution when it comes to mobile. So when I think about our successes, it's really trying out these new targeting technologies that allow us to be really direct response oriented to get in front of the travel customer, and then having a click to call component that is at this point our most accurate way to track.
So I think you made one of the key points that our industry is it's important to be open about right now, which is that these new behaviors are things that we haven't instrumented as an industry, and we haven't yet figured out how to track someone who walks into a store necessarily, who walks up to the counter at a Starwood property and says, hey, I had this experience on the phone, I opened a map, I walked into the property, I need a room for tonight, right? The experience Josh talked about earlier. Click to call was something that we traditionally didn't think of a call as a conversion necessarily, but now as an industry we've sort of come to understand the specifics of how conversions work and when a call does convert and the value of a call. And I think over time, and Google is certainly investing here to try to understand where are we driving foot traffic, where are we frankly sometimes driving people out of a physical store and into another physical store. And I think these are all new experiences that we're trying to instrument. Maybe if I invite the other three panelists in on ROI more broadly, but how you're thinking about measuring mobile and how you think about your mobile marketing.
So I'll jump in. I guess we tend to think about mobile marketing in a very holistic fashion. So any of the drivers that impact that touch point and then lead to a conversion is of interest to us. But I think the point that you made about instrumentation is very, very important too. So that mobile is opening up newer, I think, analytical ways of looking at the customer journey to any outcome that is desired by you. So for example, what we have seen is that actually some of our customers look at our images and go to the local florists that we have in the communities and tell them, hey, I want X, Y, and Z changed in this bouquet, can you do it? So it's not the traditional transactional outcomes that are being facilitated, but even newer forms of interaction that frankly is very exciting for us.
But hard to measure, right?
Very hard to measure, but you know, sending a smile is our business. So anytime we can facilitate that, that's a win for us.
Yeah, so there are new ways of creating value and changing the bouquet and lots of different things.
Sure.
Josh and Juan, are there sort of similar stories and or not great experiences around measurability and client goals?
So we have gotten to a point, and I think it was mentioned earlier, I'm sorry, I apologize, I forget who mentioned it, but the idea of budgeting this thing as part of our marketing initiatives, I think was a big win for us because it allowed us to decide at that moment that, you know what, this particular tactic is working better than something else, and I'm talking just broadly, and we could more easily move that around. Where many organizations at times will budget things separately, and so sometimes, you know, there's a bit of partnership you have to do to get those monies transferred, and sometimes it's just an effectiveness or an effect where you can't actually even do that. So I think for us, having that focus on the ROI metrics and showing what percentage of the online connects come from mobile, and then showing the media sources that they come from, it's been a very easy conversation to have in terms of funding. I think what we frankly have struggled with is figuring out more funding around some of these things. So it's where can we find more dollars to put into this without losing some of the other great things that we're doing. So we can't, there's at some point an end of budget that we can't continue to just pour more money into things. But we see volume around here in a way that says, we need to focus here even further. And so we're doing a lot of that based on the ROI calculations that we've come up with.
How many of you, and any of you should sound off on this, but Joanna, I'll ask you, how many of you have thought about a marketing experience that may start on the phone but ultimately be continued on desktop or online or on a laptop and be consummated there? Are any of you measuring that?
Absolutely. I mean, we certainly look at phone to all the way through desktop, and we have a way to understand offline attribution. I mean, especially again when you talk about the hotel experience, there's so many details. Oftentimes we have customers that may want to pick up the phone, ask the questions, but they know the best rate is when you book online, and that's also translatable to mobile. So I think the example that you just gave it's very relevant in the travel space.
All right, cool. Amit, any thoughts on sort of how people are using physical world, mobile, and maybe desktop in complementary ways and how they move back and forth between these?
Sure. What we are seeing more and more is that people are agnostic to the screens that they have, but they're very specific in the information they are looking for. So what we have seen in our business very interestingly is that, because we are in such a gifting category, people might start their search or the discovery phase, let's say on the tablet, because they can flip through a lot more imagery. But ultimately, when they are making the transaction, if it is very close to the event date, they are shifting to their mobile phone on the go. But let's say, you have a week and you really want to, look and feel the product. A lot of them are going into the store and sort of saying that this is what we are looking at, and this is what we actually want to pick up the next day. So it's not just like how people are using the mobile experience and extending it, but how fundamentally this is challenging the other channels that are already in play.
I think challenging, but also complementing, because you've got it when you do realize that you forgot to get those flowers. You've got that connectivity with you. Yeah. I want to leverage. You also mentioned tablet, and so we went into this thinking, well, is the tablet? And I think many of our customers ask us, is the tablet a desktop experience? Is a tablet a mobile experience? And I think where we've come out based on data on time of day usage and patterns that we see is that a tablet really is its own thing. But I wanted to invite Juan to sort of start the conversation and others to get in on what have you seen around tablets and how is OMD thinking about tablets broadly?
Well, I think you raise a good point. I mean, the tablets, depending on who you're talking to, tablets an extension of online, it's an extension of magazines, it's an extension of newspapers, an extension of television. It fits into so many categories. And again, it goes back to understanding usage and going back. I mean, as one example, if we're talking to a client that's interested in retail within mobile, there's the difference between what we're looking at in smartphone and what we're looking at in tablet. The tablet is the multitasking device. You're sitting back at home, you're watching TV, but you're also browsing in tablet, and you're making more purchases in tablet. Smartphone is that device that sends you to retail, helps you discover a product in store, but tablet is the one that sits back and allows you to shop. And when we look at behavior of tablet versus online, for instance, in just the one bucket of retail, we're seeing that there's better opportunities, if you will, for our clients in the tablet environment. But there's always going to be that, at least for the time being, that debate of, is the tablet, if it's a device that people are using at home, you don't see many people opening up a barcode scanning app on a tablet and trying to read something in Best Buy with it. It's a home device for the most part. That leads a lot of people to argue, well, how is it mobile in the true sense of mobility if the common usage is at home? But when you look at other behavior in terms of app usage, that would bucket it into a mobile device. So we do, for our clients, we do use it in our planning for all of their mobile exercises, really. We're using it more now that it's getting scale than we have in the past.
I think one of the things that you got on that's amazing is which device you're on is actually becoming a signal based on what you're doing with it. And I think the definition of mobile is blurring. For me, mobile is becoming more of a context than the actual device, because if you did have that tablet with you in Best Buy or on the train, it might exhibit more mobile-type experiences, whereas if you use the phone in the home the way you might use a tablet, it might be more tablet-like. So I think we're slightly moving away from the device as indicator and maybe into context. Josh and Michelle, do you want to talk a little about how tablets fit for you?
You know what, I'll defer to Michelle because I can tell you just at a very quick level, our tablet experience is very much what you see on the desktop. And it's what we're trying to think through in our next gen. We're not doing a disservice because it's good information in terms of how it renders, but I don't think we've nailed what that tablet experience should be because unlike a Starwood or an 800 Flowers or like a Gilt, you're not necessarily looking at a room and pictures and flowers. So I think understanding tiers of service can be done effectively with our current experience on a tablet.
Mm-hmm. Michelle?
Yeah, and currently our tablet experience is similar. It is our website experience. Our photography renders just so beautifully on a tablet device that we really have no other reason to not use our existing websites for tablet. From a marketing perspective, we kind of do bucket it with mobile only because, again, we get back to those the tracking issues and the challenges we have there. But it's a beautiful screen to do really high impact brand awareness plays. We've done full screen takeovers. It's been really wonderful, but marketing aside, we do leverage our existing websites for tablet.
And I think that's representative. I think at this point in time, tablets are largely a new phenomenon. You're starting to see people take advantage of touch screens or take advantage of that context that Joanne mentioned about being in a certain mindset when you're using a tablet in certain sort of time of day and place. But I do think people are still learning about those best practices, and maybe if we do the follow-up to this in a year, we can report back and see if there's a divergence of tablet sites and desktop sites. I might use that as a jumping off point we were going to take one question from our audience, which I think they threw you a softball here. Which is sort of an open-ended question about where are we going? What do you see happening over the next 5 years, it says. And I think I would ask that to you both for your organization, what's next, what are you thinking about and investing in, as well as, if you want to take it on, for this topic of mobile in general, what kinds of things are you watching to see if they happen as we look out a bit?
But I will say there's just a cornucopia, if that works, of opportunity, I think, in this world. I love the 5-year prediction because I can be incredibly wrong, and I may not be here in 5 years for anybody to catch me on it. But I think what we come to in these areas, I think, especially for Comcast, and again, I think I'll go beyond just what my world is. I mean, clearly there's the consumption of content. So we, at this point, allow customers to access a lot of content across a lot of devices. And that's just not only if you're mobile being out of your home, but I mean, if your family's watching something on one television and you want to fire up the game or watch something else, you can do that on your tablet or your mobile device. And so I think that those opportunities are just going to become greater. I think for marketers, it's up to us to help people do probably 2 things, which is, one, understand how can you enhance what you have already with this mobile experience. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there in helping people understand what they can do. I think there's also an ability to say, what aren't you leveraging now because you may not be at a level of a service, or you may not have a product of ours that enables this. So I think there's sort of twofold sort of enhancing and sales opportunity for us. But I mean, I think in general, there's no secret that this mobile thing will continue to grow. I think for all marketers, it's a function of where do you see your audience going, and so do you see more of them? Will more of our help people go to the mobile, go to their mobile device? Will more of our movers traffic go that way? Those are patterns that we haven't quite seen yet, but I think I feel comfortable that we have the backbone in place to now start to see those patterns and then either respond to them or get in front of them.
I think 5 years is that's a tough arc. I mean, 5 years ago, people were using styluses on their phones, and the technology is changing dramatically, and that's what really is. I mean, we all talk about consumer behavior. That's really what's moving the needle on consumer behavior is the devices and what they allow the consumer to do. So in 5 years' time, the phone may be embedded on a contact lens that sits above your eyeball. I mean, you don't know how the device is really going to be in a few years. What we have to do is those that are kind of standing in front of the crowd and representing the industry and the opportunities to our clients and internally to our other fellow marketers, is to make sure that clients understand that unlike some other channels, mobile really requires fluidity. I mean, there needs to be a different mindset now from brands where the word incremental is not a bad word, where things need to be looked at in a very, in small clips. You can't plan mobile out 12 months because as we sit here having this talk right now, there's somebody sitting in his mom's garage developing something that's going to impact our world somehow as a marketer or consumer in a few months' time possibly. So I think in the 5-year plan, it's just understanding that we have to embrace for change. We have to be open to the fact that there's always going to be change and plan for the change instead of just trying to plan as it's a marketing channel just like anything else.
Okay. And I think that goes with what we heard earlier from Ahmed about watching the data and being sort of constantly reacting, not letting the paint dry too much. Yeah. Michelle, do you want to prognosticate and take us home?
Yeah, sure. I'll take us all home. So, I would say my goal, and hopefully it won't take 5 years to get there, but is to have a really clear attribution model across a user's multi-screen journey, because then when we think about our marketing budgets and our media mix and our message sequencing, we could be so much smarter about either segments or individuals, and that's a big gap right now. It's something that keeps me up at night. It's hard to we don't have something that ties it all together. So I hope that in less than 5 years, we will have true attribution when it comes to mobile, desktop, TV, maybe even print.
Well, Google agrees, and I will tell you that we're investing as much on our part for one organization trying to invest to make that true. We agree completely. What I would, I guess, layer on this is from our perspective. We're excited about all the things that each of you talked about, and I think we've got to get the basics in place. I don't think we've really leveraged the things that are the most exciting to me about mobile, which are proximity and all kinds of new signals that we think we'll be able to leverage. But I think the blocking and tackling, the basics that you talked about understanding what someone's doing when they're on a smartphone and a tablet, and building those properties to engage them specifically for those devices are the fundamentals that will enable us to take advantage of, as Joanne says, whatever comes over the next 5 years, once we have those fundamentals in place. So with that, I want to remind everyone that this is just the tip of the iceberg of the type of conversation and content, which is why we built the mobile playbook, which you can find at themobileplaybook.com. Visit it on your tablet. It's content built for a tablet. And we want to hear your feedback. Hopefully it'll answer some of the questions and start new conversations. I'm grateful to these 4 folks for joining and sharing a little bit of what they've learned through their investment in mobile. And I actually like the idea, which I tripped over earlier, which is hopefully getting the group back together with the time-elapsed view as we have another year of this under our belts. But thank you very much for joining, and to everyone that tuned in.